The 5 p.m. deadline is nearing for Donald Trump and his legal team to respond to a request from prosecutors that seeks to block the former president from commenting publicly on evidence shared with them in the election interference case.
His legal team are facing a 5 o'clock deadline. They have to respond to a request by federal prosecutors to impose a protective order against him. This comes after Trump was indicted last week on 4 criminal counts related to allegations that he attempted to overturn the 2020 election results. ABC's M. Wynn has the latest.
Not only do they want to violate President Trump's First Amendment rights, they want to violate freedom of the press.
Trump's attorneys sought a deadline extension this weekend, but Tanya Chutkin, the federal judge who will preside over this case, swiftly denied it. Trump then posted on social media that he can't get a fair trial before this judge or a D.C. jury.
They're trying to make it illegal to question the results of an election.
All right, so here we go again. Another Trump legal case, another prosecutor stepping in, another pile of evidence, another round of people screaming on Twitter about whether this is justice or a witch hunt. And honestly, this one's different, like seriously different, because what's happening right now in Georgia isn't just some sideshow. It's not background noise. This is a full-on legal earthquake that could actually, I'm going to say it, send Donald Trump to prison. I know, you've heard that before, but stick with me because the details on this are absolutely wild. So here's what just went down. A brand new special prosecutor, Pete Scandalakis, just got handed the Georgia election interference case, the one that's been dragging through the courts for months, the one everyone thought was dead in the water. Yeah, that one. And he's sitting there right now, staring at a mountain of evidence that the previous prosecutors compiled. Evidence that supposedly shows Trump tried to mess with Georgia's 2024 election results. And get this, the judge in this case, he didn't throw it out. He didn't dismiss it. He looked at all the drama, all the controversy, all the accusations flying around, and he said, yeah, we're moving forward, just with a different prosecutor. Can you believe this? But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
The day before January 6th, if memory serves, they came back, his lawyers did, and said, we want you to reject votes outright. They were asking me to overturn the election. I had no right to overturn the election.
Trump's lawyer suggesting they'd love to call Pence as a witness.
Mike Pence will be one of our best witnesses at trial.
Judge Chutkin has given the special counsel until Thursday to come up with a date to start a trial.
Now, before you roll your eyes and think this is just another nothing burger, let me tell you why this matters, why this is actually a huge deal. Because Scandalakis, he's not Fani Willis, he's not the prosecutor who got kicked off the case for, let's just say, questionable judgment. He's supposed to be the clean slate, the impartial guy, the one who comes in without all the baggage and political drama. And that's either really good news for Trump or really, really bad news. Because if Scandalakis looks at this evidence and says, yeah, there's something here, we're going to trial, well, that changes everything. That means this isn't just political theater. That means there might actually be a case, a real case, one that could put a former president behind bars. Trump's lawyers? Oh, they're freaking out. Steve Sato, Trump's lead attorney, he's out here saying this whole prosecution needs to end, that it's politically charged, that a fair review will lead to dismissal. And you know what? He might be right, or he might be completely wrong. That's what makes this so intense. Because here's the thing. The Georgia Supreme Court already weighed in on this. They said, nope, Fani Willis can't prosecute this case. She's out, done, disqualified. That happened back in September, and everyone thought, okay, that's it, case over, Trump wins. Pack it up. But then plot twist, they didn't dismiss the case. They just got a new prosecutor. And now that new prosecutor has to decide, do we keep going? Do we drop some charges? Or do we throw the whole thing out? And while he's making that decision, Trump is sitting there waiting. The evidence is sitting there waiting. The judge is sitting there waiting. And the whole country is watching to see what happens next. This isn't just about Trump anymore, though. Like, yeah, he's the main character in this story. But this case, it's about something way bigger. It's about whether powerful people can actually be held accountable. It's about whether the justice system is fair or broken. It's about whether prosecutors can go after political rivals without it looking like a total hit job. And depending on who you ask, this case is either the most important prosecution in American history or the most corrupt abuse of power we've ever seen. There's no middle ground here. Nobody's sitting on the fence saying, well, let's wait and see. Everyone's already picked a side. So that's where we're at. New prosecutor, Same evidence, same charges, same defendant, but a completely different dynamic. Because now Skandalakis has all the power. He can end this tomorrow if he wants, or he can push forward and take Trump to trial. And here's what nobody's talking about. What if he does both? What if he drops some charges, but keeps the big ones? What if he narrows the case down to the stuff that's actually provable and dumps the rest? That would be smart, right? That would make this whole thing look less political and more legitimate. But it would also mean Trump still faces real legal jeopardy, real consequences, real possibility of conviction. So yeah, buckle up. Because this story is about to get wild. And I mean really wild. We're talking courtroom drama, political chaos, media meltdowns, and a former president who might actually end up in handcuffs. The trembling evidence, as some outlets are calling it, isn't just sitting in a filing cabinet somewhere. It's active, it's being reviewed, it's being considered, and depending on what Skandalakis decides, it could be presented in a courtroom with Trump sitting at the defendant's table. Think about that for a second. A former president in a courtroom facing criminal charges for allegedly trying to overturn an election. That's not normal. That's not something that happens in America, except it might. It actually might happen. And whether you think that's justice being served or democracy being destroyed, you have to admit it's historic, it's unprecedented, and it's happening right now. Let's dive in. Okay, so let's back up for a second and talk about how we even got here. Because this story is messy, like really messy. And if you haven't been following every twist and turn, it's easy to get lost. So, the Georgia case, what's it actually about? Well, it all goes back to the 2024 election. Trump lost Georgia by a pretty decent margin, actually. But he wasn't happy about it. Shocking, I know. And according to prosecutors, he didn't just complain about it on Twitter. He allegedly tried to do something about it. We're talking phone calls to state officials, pressure campaigns, meetings with lawyers and allies to figure out how to overturn the results. And yeah, that whole thing with the fake electors, you remember that, right? The scheme where Trump's team allegedly put together a slate of fake electors who would vote for him even though he lost the state. That's what this case is about. Election interference, trying to mess with the results, trying to change the outcome through, let's say, creative legal strategies that may or may not have been totally illegal. And Fani Willis, the district attorney in Fulton County, she looked at all this and said, okay, we're charging him. Not just Trump, by the way. Like a whole bunch of people, lawyers, advisors, allies. It was a massive case. RICO charges, conspiracy charges, the works. But then things got complicated because Fani Willis, she made some choices. Personal choices, professional choices. Choices that, come on, anyone could see would cause problems. She hired a special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, to help with the case. And then, yeah, she started dating him while he was working on the case, while he was getting paid taxpayer money to prosecute Trump. And when that came out, oh man, the Trump team pounced on it. They filed motions to disqualify her. They accused her of financial conflicts of interest. They said the whole case was tainted. And honestly, they had a point. Because even if you think the case against Trump is legitimate, even if you believe he did everything prosecutors say he did, you can't have the lead prosecutor dating someone on her team while they're prosecuting a former president. Like, come on. That's just bad judgment, terrible optics, and it gave Trump's lawyers exactly what they needed to throw the whole thing into chaos. So the judge, he held hearings, he looked at the evidence, and he said, yeah, this is a tremendous lapse in judgment. Those were his actual words, tremendous lapse in judgment. But he didn't kick Willis off the case right away. He let it keep going for a while until the Georgia Supreme Court stepped in and they said, nope, she's out, disqualified, done. And that's when everyone thought, okay, this case is dead. No way they're going to keep prosecuting Trump after all this drama. But here's the thing. The evidence is still there. The charges are still there. The indictment is still there. And Georgia law says, okay, if the original prosecutor gets disqualified, you bring in a new one. You don't just automatically dismiss the case. So they brought in Pete Skandalakis, and now he's got this giant mess dumped in his lap. He's got to sift through everything Willis and her team put together. He's got to review the evidence. He's got to decide if it's strong enough to go to trial. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because Skandalakis, he's not some partisan hack. He's not out here making political speeches. He's a prosecutor, a serious one. And he's got three options. Option one, keep going with everything. All the charges, all the defendants. Exactly the way Willis planned it. That would be bold. That would send a message that this case is legit, no matter who's prosecuting it. Option two, par it down. Drop some charges. Drop some defendants. Focus on the strongest parts of the case and dump the rest. That would be smart. That would make the case easier to win and harder for Trump's team to attack his overreach. Option three, drop it. Just walk away. Say, you know what? This case has too much baggage. It's too political. It's not worth it. Let it go. And honestly, any of those options could happen. We don't know which way Skandalakis is leaning. He hasn't said much publicly. He's keeping his cards close. But Trump's team? They're pushing hard for option 3. Steve Sato is out here saying this whole thing is politically charged, that it needs to end, that a fair review will lead to dismissal. And you know what? He's probably right that it's politically charged. I mean, let's be real. Of course it is. You're prosecuting a former president. Everything about that is political. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. And it doesn't mean the evidence isn't real. Because here's what people forget. The judge already looked at this. He already reviewed the situation. And yeah, he called out Willis for her lapse in judgment. But he didn't dismiss the case. He didn't say there's nothing here. He said let's get a new prosecutor and keep moving. That's significant. Like really significant. Because if this was just a total garbage case with no merit, the judge could have thrown it out. He had the opportunity. He had the excuse. All the drama with Willis. That would have been the perfect cover to just kill the whole thing. But he didn't. He kept it alive. And now Skandalakis has to deal with it. And here's the other thing nobody's talking about. What happens if Skandalakis does move forward? What happens if he says, yeah, I've reviewed the evidence and there's enough here to go to trial? That would be huge. That would mean this isn't just partisan nonsense. That would mean there's actually something to prosecute. Because if a new prosecutor, someone who doesn't have all the baggage, someone who's supposed to be impartial, looks at the same evidence and says, yeah, we're going forward, that changes the narrative completely. Suddenly, it's not about Fani Willis and her personal drama. It's about the evidence. It's about what Trump allegedly did. It's about whether he tried to interfere with an election. And that's a much harder case for Trump to defend in the court of public opinion. Because right now, his whole strategy is to make this about Willis, to make it about prosecutorial misconduct, to make it about political persecution. But if Willis is gone and the case is still moving forward, that argument falls apart. So yeah, Skandalakis has a lot of power right now. More power than maybe he even realizes. Because whatever he decides, it's going to shape the next few months of American politics. If he drops the case, Trump claims victory. He says, see, it was all a hoax, all political, and his supporters rally around him even harder. If he moves forward, even with a scaled down version of the charges, Trump's in serious legal jeopardy. And that becomes a major story heading into 2026 and beyond. And if he does something in the middle, drops some stuff, but keeps other stuff, then everyone's going to be arguing about what that means. Was it a win for Trump? A loss? A draw? This is chess, people. High stakes, high drama, high consequence chess. And we're all just sitting here watching the next move. Now let's talk about what makes this case different from all the other legal battles Trump's faced. Because he's been in court a lot, right? Like, a lot. Civil cases, criminal cases, investigations, indictments. The guy's basically lived in courtrooms for the past few years. But this one hits different. Because this isn't about business fraud. This isn't about classified documents. This isn't about hush money payments to adult film stars. This is about democracy itself. This is about whether a president can try to overturn an election and get away with it. And that makes it personal for a lot of people. Like really personal. Because if you believe the election was stolen, then Trump was just fighting for what was right. He was standing up against corruption. He was the hero. But if you believe the election was fair, then Trump was trying to steal it. He was undermining democracy. He was the villain. There's no version of this story where both sides are happy. And that's what makes it so explosive. Alright, so let's break this down into the key points you need to understand. Because there's a lot of noise around this story, and it's easy to get lost in all the drama and miss what actually matters. Point number 1, this case is still alive. I know a lot of people thought it was dead when Fani Willis got disqualified. I know Trump's team has been acting like it's over, but it's not. The Georgia Supreme Court didn't kill the case. They just removed the prosecutor, and now there's a new prosecutor reviewing everything. That's not a small detail. That's the whole ball game. Because as long as the case is active, as long as there's a prosecutor looking at the evidence, Trump is still facing potential criminal charges in Georgia. And those charges, they're not minor. We're talking election interference, RICO conspiracy, serious stuff. Point number 2, Pete Skandalakis has all the power right now. He's the one who decides if this moves forward or dies. And he's in a really interesting position because he doesn't have the baggage that Willis had. He can look at this case with fresh eyes. He can make a decision based on the evidence, not on politics or personal drama. Now, does that mean he will? I don't know. Nobody knows. But the fact that he has that ability, that's important. Because if he decides to move forward, it's a lot harder for Trump to claim this is just a political hit job. A new prosecutor, supposedly impartial, looking at the same evidence and saying, yeah, there's something here that carries weight, that carries serious weight. And it completely changes how people on both sides of this debate are going to view what happens next. It takes away one of Trump's biggest defenses, which is that this whole thing was just Fani Willis going rogue with a personal vendetta. If Skandalakis agrees with her assessment, then it's not just one prosecutor's opinion anymore. It's two different prosecutors looking at the same facts, coming to the same conclusion. Point number 3, the evidence matters. And we need to talk about what that evidence actually is, because according to the sources, there's a lot of it. We're talking recordings of phone calls, testimony from witnesses, documents, emails, the whole 9 yards. And some of that evidence is pretty damning. Like there's literally a recording of Trump on the phone with Georgia's Secretary of State asking him to find enough votes to flip the election. That's not speculation. That's not hearsay. That's Trump's actual voice on tape. Now, Trump's team says that call was perfectly legal, that he was just asking questions, that he had every right to challenge the results. And yeah, sure, he had the right to challenge the results through legal channels, but asking someone to find votes, that's questionable at best. And that's just one piece of evidence. There's also all the stuff about the fake electors, the meetings with lawyers, the pressure campaigns. When you add it all up, it paints a picture. And that picture is what Skandalakis has to evaluate. Does it prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Trump broke the law? That's what a jury would have to decide. But does it at least show enough evidence to go to trial? That's what Skandalakis has to figure out. Point number 4. This isn't just about Trump. Like, yeah, he's the main focus, but this case has way bigger implications. Because if Trump gets convicted, if he actually faces consequences for trying to overturn an election, that sets a precedent that says, okay, you can't do this. Even if you're president, even if you have power, even if you think the election was stolen, you can't break the law to change the outcome. And that's important because right now we're in this weird moment where half the country thinks Trump is a hero fighting against a rigged system, and the other half thinks he's a criminal who belongs in prison. In this case, it's a test of whether the justice system can actually hold powerful people accountable. If Skandalakis drops the case, the people who think Trump is being persecuted will feel vindicated. They'll say, see, there was nothing there. It was all political. If Skandalakis moves forward and Trump gets convicted, the people who think he's a criminal will feel vindicated. They'll say, see, he broke the law. Justice prevailed. But here's the thing. No matter what happens, a huge chunk of the country is going to be furious because we're so polarized right now, so divided, so dug into our positions that there's no outcome where everyone says, okay, that was fair. And that's the real tragedy here. Not just what happens to Trump, but what this says about where we are as a country, that we can't even agree on basic facts anymore, that we can't trust the same institutions, that everything, and I mean everything, is seen through a political lens. Point number 5. The timing of all this matters. We're not in an election cycle right now, obviously. Trump's already serving his second term. But what happens with this case is still going to impact politics. Because if Trump gets convicted, that changes his legacy. That changes how history remembers him. That changes the conversation about his presidency. And it also impacts everyone around him. All the people who supported him. All the politicians who defended him. Because if he actually broke the law, if he actually tried to steal an election, then what does that say about the people who enabled him? That's the question a lot of Republicans are going to have to answer if this case moves forward. And it's not a comfortable question. It's not a question they want to face, but they might have to. Now let's talk about what this means for future elections, because that's really what's at stake here. If Trump can allegedly try to overturn an election and face no consequences, what's to stop the next person from doing the same thing? What's to stop future candidates from pressuring state officials, creating fake electors, doing whatever it takes to win? On the flip side, if prosecutors can charge a former president with election interference based on what he says were legitimate legal challenges, what's to stop future prosecutors from going after any politician who questions election results? See, that's the dilemma. Both sides have a point. Both sides have legitimate concerns, and there's no easy answer. What we need is a clear legal standard. We need the courts to say, okay, here's where the line is. Here's what counts as legitimate election challenges, and here's what counts as criminal interference. But right now, that line is blurry, and this case might be what forces the courts to draw it. Point number 6. The political fallout from this is going to be massive, regardless of what happens. Think about it. If Skandalakis drops the case, Democrats are going to be furious. They're going to say the justice system failed, that Trump got away with it again, that accountability doesn't exist for powerful people. If he moves forward, Republicans are going to be furious. They're going to say it's a witch hunt, that prosecutors are weaponizing the justice system, that this is political persecution. There's no winning here. Not really. because the country is too divided to accept any outcome as legitimate. And that's scary, like really scary, because if we can't trust the justice system to be fair, if every prosecution looks political, if every acquittal looks like a cover-up, then what do we have left? What institutions can we still believe in? What common ground can we still stand on? These are the questions that keep me up at night, because this isn't just about one case or one president. This is about the fabric of our democracy. This is about whether we can still function as a country when we can't agree on anything. So where does all this leave us? Well, we're in a waiting game. Skandalakis is reviewing the evidence. He's making his decision. And at some point, probably soon, we're going to find out what he decides. If he drops the case, Trump walks away. The story ends, and we move on to the next drama. If he moves forward, even with the scaled down version, we're looking at months, maybe years of legal battles, motions, appeals, hearings, and possibly a trial. And if there's a trial, oh man, that's going to be a circus. Media coverage, 24/7, every day, new revelations, witnesses testifying, evidence being presented, Trump's team fighting back. It'll dominate the news cycle. But here's what I keep coming back to. This case is still alive. After all the drama, after all the setbacks, after Fani Willis got kicked off, after everyone thought it was over, it's still here. And that tells you something. It tells you that maybe, just maybe, there's actually something to it. Because if this was truly a baseless witch hunt, it would have died by now. The judge would have killed it. The appeals court would have killed it. But they didn't. They kept it going. They brought in a new prosecutor. They said, let's review the evidence and see what we've got. And now we're at the moment of truth. Skandalakis has the evidence. He has the power, and he has to decide what to do with it. Will he look at that pile of documents, those recordings, those witness statements, and say, yeah, there's enough here to prosecute? Or will he say, you know what? This is too messy, too political, not worth it. We don't know yet, but we're about to find out. And when we do, it's going to send shockwaves through American politics, because this isn't just another legal case. This is a test of accountability, a test of the justice system, a test of whether the rules apply to everyone or just to some people. So now we wait, we watch, and we see what Pete Skandalakis decides to do with all that trembling evidence sitting on his desk, because whatever he decides is going to matter. It's going to shape the conversation. It's going to impact Trump's legacy, and it's going to test whether our justice system can actually handle cases like this without completely falling apart. And honestly, I'm not sure we're ready for that test, but ready or not, here it comes. The next few weeks are going to be wild. The next few months might be even wilder. And depending on what Skandalakis decides, we could be looking at one of the biggest criminal trials in American history. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. Next time, we'll dive into what Trump's other legal cases look like now that he's in office. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss that.